I guess the reason why I wanted to remake Footloose is that I love the original. And the more I started looking at how I would redo it. I started seeing that there were a lot of things that actually made Footloose, the story, very relevant. I had heard that they were wanting to remake it and make it a little bit more of kind of like a dance musical celebration, which kind of would border perhaps on spoofing the original. And I really loved the original film, but I think I loved it in a different way than a lot of people love it. I think some people look at it as this cheesy 80s nostalgia thing, and it was one of my first real movies as a kid. And I know I was 13 when I saw it, and I think everything is to some extent romanticized when you see something when you're 13. But I actually saw that it could actually be perhaps even more relevant today than it was in 1984. And I know that I get a lot of speculation or skepticism as to how you can redo Footloose in 2011 and make it relevant, like what town would possibly do this. But once I started realizing that I needed to tap into something inside of myself that was more of a parent than necessarily the rebel, like what I wanted to be when I was younger. I wanted to be Ren McCormick. But I got 2 kids now, and I'm much more like the preacher. I'm much more like Reverend Shah. I'm more cautious about my kids, and I would probably line up right with everybody else passing these laws if it meant protecting their safety. And that kind of overreaction, I think, is a uniquely contemporary American theme right now. And there really wasn't a lot of movies right now for young people to see, to give them that same sense of empowerment, to be individuals, to stand up for what you want, and also have like these really cool music moments in it. So it could be entertaining as well as something that could be empowering to somebody. I came from the theater where you would read a play or you would see a Broadway musical, and then you would find out that your school was doing that play or Broadway musical, and you finally got a chance to be Amadeus, or you finally got a chance to, be Nicely Johnson and Guys and Dolls, and just like that guy that you saw on stage. So the fact that you could redo something from your youth or something that you really loved was an exciting thing. I know there's a lot of people out there that are critical of like taking a movie and remaking it, but there is something particularly exciting on my part of it. Like artistically, I think that Footloose, I had more at risk than doing a movie where I chain an nymphomaniac to a radiator like in Black Snake Moan, or have a pimp rapping in Hustle and Flow. There's more of an expectation, there's more risk, and if anything, I feel that the reward is greater. I mean, I think we did Footloose justice, and I think we did Footloose justice because we came at it with the right intention. It wasn't just a money grab. It wasn't just like, well, let's just do something, dancing is really big right now, so let's just do a dance movie and throw Footloose on the front of it. If anything, I think some of the people that were looking for like the quote-unquote step up, stomp the yard type of dance movie, I don't want to say they're disappointed, but they're surprised how much movie is in Footloose. It's not so much like, let's just do a bunch of a playlist of all these songs and have people dancing to it. We tried to make it a little bit more organic, a little bit more in service to the narrative instead of the other way around. Well, I think the thing that I always try to tell filmmakers when they ask me, like, how do I become a filmmaker, I always tell them, try to make a film every other weekend, and don't put so much of a burden on it being like a big movie within a small short. Because I think to some extent it's the obstacles, it's the things that you don't have that sometimes makes a great piece of art. Robert Rodriguez talked about it in his book, about how he had a very noisy camera, so he couldn't use sound on his camera. So he had an editing style that if things went out of sync, he would cut to somebody else. And now you watch Robert's films, and he has plenty of money that he can make a movie, but his editing style came out of the limitations he had as a filmmaker. So if I were to make a 5-minute film, I think the first thing that I would want to do is to try to remind myself that even though I've got a camera, even though I've got equipment and a location and some actors, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to make a feature-long movie in its size and scope within 5 minutes. To some extent, the 5-minute thing is an interesting challenge, because what can you really do with 5 minutes? So I would probably, for the first thing I would say to myself is like, how about no dialogue? Can I do something with no dialogue in this 5 minutes? Could it be just like two people waking up from a one-night stand and being awkward with which toothbrush to use? You know, something that I would want to utilize the actors in a way that isn't all production heavy. You know, is there a way that I can convey an emotion? Is there something that I can do that could be fun and funny but still sincere? You know, but I think what's probably most important with a 5 minute film is how can you start to establish who you are and what your visual style or what your creative intent is, even with 5 minutes. I would hope that if I made a 5 minute movie now, people could look at it and go, yeah, that's kind of like Craig Brewer, you know? So the beauty of having a challenge like that is you can start figuring that out right now without the burden of all this money and all this box office and you know, things that have nothing to do with art, that has nothing to do with you figuring out who you are as a filmmaker. This is the time and the opportunity to figure that out.